So you might have embarked upon your advertising career and you might not be quite where you want to be just yet. And you're probably thinking to yourself, shit, what now? Well, in this episode, I talked to Paul Catmur. He's a co-founder of Barnes, Catmur and Friends Dentsu in New Zealand. But prior to that, he held roles as Executive Creative Director and Regional Executive Creative Director at DDB and George Pat's Melbourne. I really enjoyed talking to Paul and his dog Monty. And if you want to listen to more of Paul and sometimes his dog Monty, he has his own podcast called Truth and Soul. It's one of New Zealand's top advertising podcasts. So I'll link that down below so that you can listen to it after this. As always, please remember to like, share and subscribe below and enjoy the episode.
My name's Paul Catmur. I'm kind of semi-retired and I spend most of my time writing, dog walking and fishing these days. I was co-founder of Barnes, Catmur and Friends, which became Barnes, Catmur and Friends Dentsu, which became Dentsu Creative New Zealand, I think. Before that, I spent a happy time at DDB New Zealand, where I was ECD and regional ECD for Asia Pacific. And then I spent a year at George Pat's as regional ECD as well. And
always in New Zealand?
I spent 10 years working in London at Y&R before coming over to New Zealand, and the time with George Pat's was in Melbourne.
Yeah, brilliant. And prior to all that, Paul, how did you break into advertising? How did your journey start?
Well, being a child of Thatcher, I left university in the early 80s. I couldn't get a job anywhere. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. Ended up working in casinos and spent 5 years working in London and in the Bahamas as a craps dealer, as a dice dealer. Saved up enough money eventually in the Bahamas to spend 1 year doing whatever I wanted. And I ended up going to advertising college, School of Communication Arts in London. I'd been aware of advertising through my dad, who used to work in it in the 50s and 60s, but he was of absolutely no help whatsoever in getting a job. But I made it eventually.
Yeah, and so you did, obviously having won several Lions at your time at DDB, as well as founding your own agency, which leads nicely into my next question. As a successful creative, in your opinion, how should junior creatives define success? Should it all be based on the awards?
It's best not to confuse awards with achievement. There are different yardsticks, and purely to concentrate on awards, I think is not healthy at all for yourself and for the agency.
Has that been a mantra that you've had throughout your whole career?
When I was at DDB New Zealand in the 2006, we were in what I thought was would be peak awards, and it was a maelstrom. It was something that you were supposed to do, and I thought things would calm down after that. And bizarrely, it hasn't happened, and they've got even more money and time is spent chasing them. When I was at DDB, we had, I said to guys, we've got great clients. There's no need to do scams. If you can do good enough work for the clients that we have to win awards, all well and good, but otherwise don't be too concerned about it. And when we started Barnes, Catmur and Friends, we didn't concentrate on or chase creative awards at all. If we had a fixation, it was towards effectiveness, which is, after all, what clients pay us to do. Yeah. It was, if we could, and saying to creative teams, just do something. Judging creative work by whether or not you think it works is actually way more rewarding than judging it by whether or not you think it will win an award. It sounds crazy that you even have to say that, but that's the way that our industry's turned.
Yeah, absolutely. When I was at BWM Dentsu, I worked with the creative team, and working with Qantas, we developed a campaign to help Americans get over to Australia. we basically shouted the cost of a US passport for Americans to come to Australia, which is about 150 US dollars. And really the mechanic is so simple. It's effectively a discount, but wrapped up in the vernacular, we called it a passport takeoff. Still speak to those creatives now. They find that incredibly rewarding. And those are the same guys that, have other several lines, but to them, winning that gold Effies was pretty special.
Well, I always loved that campaign. Spent a lot of time with Rob Belgiovanni up in Tokyo, and Ash as well would pop out from time to time. And that's a great little campaign. Yeah, well done to them. It was, for me, it was about, if you did something that was so good that people wanted to give you a creative award for it, then that's fine. But if you could do something that was good enough that people could judge it as having done an outstandingly effective job for the client, then I think that should be absolutely more important.
Yeah, totally. When we were writing the case study for it, also one of Qantas's most highest return on investment campaign for like years, and for it to come out of a Sydney office was we're all kind of patting each other on the back for it.
No, absolutely. I would have been very proud of that. In fact, yeah, that was my idea, actually. I seem to remember. I seem to remember telling Belgie that one. So, yeah.
Definitely. So, taking into account your mantra on creative awards and different measures of success, like for you then, with that in mind, what would you define as a highlight in your career?
Several lowlights. I guess one of the highlights was we talked about this kind of before in our exchange, Chris, that when I left London, a headhunter said to me, "Well, you can go down to New Zealand, but you're going to find it really hard to come back." And so, in that sense, one of the highlights for me was going back to London in early 2008 to judge D&AD from New Zealand with walking around with a name badge that said Paul Catmur, Catmur and Friends, New Zealand. That felt good.
Yeah, I bet it was a big "I told you so" moment.
Well, it hadn't really bothered me when they told me, you won't come back to London. I'm like, who says that you want to come back to London? There was a theory then, and maybe now, that London was absolutely the epicenter of advertising, and if you weren't there, you didn't really count. And I think that's eroded a lot over the years. Still some wonderful people and wonderful work comes out of London, but it's certainly not the be all and end all that people seem to think it was.
Yeah, I agree, and to your earlier point, can confirm that that's still very much the attitude. And now I'm in Sydney, and really enjoying it, and I get to go to the beach and do what, in my own respect anyway, what I think is good work. So
yes.
As long as you're happy, then that should be your main indicator of success, for sure.
Yes, I think you're absolutely right. As an indicator of success, that is right, and that's something that people starting out in the industry should not forget, that your overall aim in life is to be happy, and far better to be happy and working in Sydney and living on a beach than being miserable as hell stuck in some ghetto in Shoreditch.
Yeah, it's quite gentrified there now. I think all the cool bankers live there now, but it's still pretty rough in some parts.
I have to say, I only spent 40 years in London, but I don't even know where Shoreditch is. But it's somewhere there, somewhere.
For those junior, are still quite young on in their career and might not be where they want to be now, what would be your advice for them?
What, in terms of if they're at an agency that they don't want to be at?
Yeah, I guess so. Or just in general, if they thought that they might have achieved more in the time that they've, say for example, someone's had 2 years at a hot agency, but not really had their golden ticket, if you like, yet, then, what would you say to them?
Well, I'm kind of actually writing a series of articles about this in the press in New Zealand about it's a manual for mediocrity, which is 80% of us are in the middle, are neither exceptionally good or exceptionally bad. We're just quite good. And how do you deal with doing that? I think as a junior team, if you find yourself continually banging your head against a brick wall and not getting anywhere, then you really have to, as I have done when I was a junior in London, you have to think about leaving. And bizarrely, I didn't have the balls to leave a job that I wasn't particularly enjoying without having another job to go to. So I stayed at an hour probably longer than was good for anyone. I was there for 9.5, 10 years because I was worried about leaving and not being able to get another job. And as it turns out, I eventually just left. I just went, you have to jump. And I was going to go abroad to go traveling and to go and write a book. And I just resigned. And then, within 2 weeks, I was working at Lea Burnett in London, which was a great agency at the time. So, yeah, just jump. If you're not happy doing what you're doing, do something else.
Always look on the bright side of life.
Yeah, absolutely. I once had a great piece of advice from a senior strategist of all people, and he said the only person that can help you in your career and can actually do something about it is you. You shouldn't always turn to someone else to help dig you out. It's ultimately you're responsible for where you are. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, absolutely. You are responsible. I mean, I try and cultivate friends and mentors and colleagues to be on your side, but it is down to you. And that's almost the slightly sad thing in my life. You might feel bad about leaving an agency where there's nice people and great culture, and you feel you're letting yourself down. Well, you only have one life, and it's your life, and you can't be beholden to other people. You have to get on and do your own thing. I'm struggling. I'm really trying hard not to say at the end of the day, which I kind of dislike as a cliche, but it is all down to you. And
yeah, absolutely. And as we draw towards the end of this conversation, Paul, in light of pivoting and taking responsibility, you obviously started BC&F. What was the motivation behind that?
There are a couple of motivations behind that. One was that for some reason it'd be something that I'd always wanted to do. It just seemed like a fun idea, and it wasn't fun. I'd spent a lot of time working for global networks, and I remember talking to Marty O'Halloran, who was the CEO of DDB New Zealand at the time, now CEO of DDB Global, and he said to me, "Where do you want to be in 5 years' time?" And I said, "I wanted to be running my own agency." It was just I don't know. Some people dream of winning a Cannes Grand Prix or something. That just seemed to be more interesting. I spent a lot of time working at agencies, generally other than DDB, thinking that, boy, they could be better run than that.
Whole thing's a bit silly.
I suppose it is a bit. What have we been doing, wasting our lives with all this nonsense? Right, okay, meeting adjourned forever.
And starting around place gave me a chance to put some of that into practice, and it was a really interesting experience, rewarding and terrifying at the same time, but really glad that we did it. So I can look back at a career and go, well, okay, I didn't win I never won a Ken Grand Prix, but did have my own agency, with partners, and that was a very fruitful thing to do.
Yeah, and now you live on a beach with a dog and go fishing.
Yeah, I honestly don't know that it was any more financially rewarding than if I'd spent the last 10 years working in a senior creative level, either in New Zealand or anywhere around the world. But I think it's really useful and interesting and rewarding thing to do. So I would recommend it to people if they feel that their life is going a little bit on the straight and narrow and easy. Then start your own agency and find just how shit becomes crazy very quickly.
Yeah, I bet. If you could give advice to yourself before you started, what would you say?
Everything that I've said in the last 15 minutes, Chris, I think, which would have been really helpful. But on the other hand, as I think it was John Lennon who said, life is what happens when you're making plans. And you for me, looking back over a kind of 30-year career, I'm really happy and really lucky with the way it's worked out. Being able to live here now with a comatose dog on a beach in New Zealand is fantastic. And I met some great people and had some great times. Things don't always work out the way you want, but you have to be ready to pivot. And I guess importantly, if you're not happy doing what you're doing, do something else, even if it hurts you financially in the short term. Yeah, I was living in the Bahamas and earning a reasonable amount of money doing a job that I hated in a casino. Like working in a casino for night is fantastic. Working there for 5 years drives you mad. And leaving that from earning a decent amount doing that to at the age of 30 being on placement, earning 50 quid a week in agency in London was kind of, in the sense, a leap backwards, but sometimes you have to go backwards to go forwards.
Yeah, definitely. Couldn't agree with that more. Well, Paul, thank you so much for taking part on Shit What Now and guiding junior creatives looking to break into the industry, but also those who are still at the very start of their career. I'm sure they'll find this super fruitful. So thank you so much for your time.
Okay, I only hope, but yeah, good night from Monty and me.
Cheers, Paul.